Hello, this is Brett Hill with Riverbed, and in this video we're going to discuss how to use Steelhead SaaS to optimize traffic to Office 365. Many businesses use Steelheads to create highly optimized traffic across their WAN. These Steelheads by default do not optimize cloud traffic. And the inherent latency in cloud traffic can significantly impact performance. Using Riverbed's Steelhead SaaS service for Office 365 with your on-premise Steelheads, routing and bandwidth to your location are optimized. A cloud Steelhead for your company is automatically created close to the Office 365 data center. It works with the on-premise Steelhead appliances to significantly reduce bandwidth. Riverbed optimizes your Office 365 traffic through deduplication, transport optimization, and compression, while Akamai provides improved routing through the cloud with their SureRoute technology, as well as hosting the automatically created, intelligently positioned cloud Steelhead. Now I know what you're thinking. Just how much faster is it? Well, watch this. That's how long it takes to transfer a 20 megabyte file. Observe. On our left, we have an unoptimized desktop connected to the same site collection as the one on the right, which is using Steelhead SaaS to optimize traffic to and from Office 365. Let's see what happens when we download the same 21 megabyte PowerPoint deck from both sites over a LAN with 2 megabits per second and 60 milliseconds of latency added. We'll start with the unoptimized desktop. We'll click Save and start the clock. On the optimized side, we'll also click Save. But before we can even begin to start the clock, the download is completed. On the Steelhead Current Connections report, you can see that 21 megabits of traffic was transferred to the optimized desktop using only 475K of internet traffic, resulting in a 97% reduction of bandwidth. That's an incredible reduction. Not to mention the improvement in performance, the unoptimized desktop is still downloading. 30 seconds later, the download is complete. Now I know what you're thinking. This must be some kind of a file cache, right? Riverbed's scalable data reduction finds many more opportunities to provide optimization than a simple file cache. To demonstrate this, we'll open the deck that we just downloaded and insert a slide that we've already copied to the clipboard. We'll save the file, and then we'll rename the file. These operations would defeat a simple file cache. And now, we'll drag and drop this file back into SharePoint Online on the optimized desktop and see how long this takes. As you can see, it's rapidly uploading into SharePoint Online, even though it's a modified, renamed file. Let's take a look at the optimization provided by Steelhead SaaS. Here you can see we got a 97% optimization, even though this file has been renamed and modified. This proves that Riverbed's scalable data reduction will find many more opportunities to improve performance and decrease bandwidth than a simple file cache. But there's more than this to Office 365. You'll also enjoy bandwidth reductions as you browse SharePoint Online websites, in addition to Outlook Web Access. And yes, Outlook is also optimized, so mail and attachments will see significant bandwidth reductions. And let's not forget OneDrive and OneDrive synchronization, which is also optimized by Riverbed Steelhead SaaS. Taking a look at all this browsing, you can see some significant reductions. And this is just one user. Imagine if there were hundreds or even thousands of users. All of this and more is part of the Steelhead SaaS service from Riverbed. Contact us for more information.
Well, good morning, good afternoon, and maybe good evening. Thanks everyone for joining us today on day 3 of Unity Connect Online. Today I'm especially excited because I'm joined by another Frenchman, and we've decided to do this entire presentation in French at your leisure. No, I'm kidding. Don't worry about it. So I'm joined from Microsoft headquarters by Christophe Feissinger. I hope I didn't say the name wrong, but he's heading the dynamic teams groups and groups for Office 365. And I thought it would be an amazing idea for him to come and kind of recap what we saw at Ignite. And of course, I'll let him introduce himself. But look over, the industry's changing. The digital workplace is upon us. People are showing up with all kinds of devices and no longer scared of internet things, right? If I can say that online here, they're not scared anymore. So we have to adapt. We have to look at what we have, and that's why we have Christophe joining us today to talk about all of that. Good morning or good afternoon, wherever, Christophe.
Well, thank you, Benjamin. It's morning for me in Seattle, but hello, good afternoon for those of you that are in different time zones. I don't know if we have any international attendees. Definitely a pleasure to be there, and definitely I want to thank Unity and Riverbed for hosting this keynote and inviting me to speak to a topic dear to my heart. Basically, the agenda is pretty simple. We want to make this interactive. But to level set, since I don't know how many of you, I'm not going to do a poll, how many of you have attended Ignite or watched some of the video that are now publicly available at Ignite. I'll start with a more formal presentation to introduce the topic, and hopefully in about 20 minutes we'll be done, and then we'll leave about an hour of Q&A so we can answer top of minds and any questions you get with respect to this topic. So with that, actually before we switch to the slides, I should probably introduce myself. Yes, born and raised in France, but I've actually lived a little bit everywhere, including the US. That's why it's hard to see if I'm French or not. But anyway, I've been at Microsoft 14 years. I've worked, started in consulting actually in Europe at MCS, being in the trenches and making magic and deploying our products back in the days. SharePoint and Project Server. I started with .NET Beta. I used to do app dev as well. And then about 7 years ago, I say it wouldn't be great to get closer to the kitchen and steer the cooks in the right directions instead of being a receiver of another version of a SharePoint, another version of Project or Office. And so that's when I moved to Redmond. And I've been in a role that we call at Microsoft Technical Product Marketing, which is we're a bridge between working with engineering and telling them prioritizations and feedback from customers and partners and working with analysts, but also there's an outbound role, which is kind of like what you're seeing today, which is how do we educate and tell people about upcoming innovations or things that we're working on, and explaining some of those investments that we're making in Redmond. So enough talking about Christophe. Let's go over a couple slides and then we'll switch to Q&A. So Lyman, great. I should have put a disclaimer that if there's any glitches, we're not using the sanctioned Microsoft product, which is Skype for Business. So nothing against competitors' product, but I got to say, to use my Microsoft disclaimer. But I'm sure once I've done that, everything's going to work. Will be smooth. So I'll go over a couple slides. There's hidden slides. There's gazillion slides out of Ignite. And for those of you that aren't aware, but Ignite is now our annual event for mainly IT professionals and enterprise. And the first one, we used to have TechEd back in the days, and we used to have different conferences, so like SharePoint conference and others. And now we've rationalized all those events, and the first one was held in Chicago at the beginning of May. So again, ton of content available. That's why I'm going to go fast, and you can download the slides, and I will, after the event, I'll give you some links. So,
and if I can interrupt you, Christophe, because you're from Microsoft, so obviously I just want to add a little bit about Ignite, just because it's, you go to conferences and you think the videos, the slides are available afterwards, but what I really appreciated from Ignite, and what I recommend for others still deciding whether or not to go, is that you really do have access to all the speakers, the product teams. I mean, just Christophe, we met at the Office 365 booth, I think in the middle, and kind of really explained some of the things that I didn't understand properly from the session. So definitely encourage everyone to go. It's not just about going to the sessions, but a lot of the communication, the talks that we have with everybody, really fun.
Yeah, no, it's I've been to many events in the past, and I agree. I think one of the value that we get engineering is meeting people. Yes, we do presentations and as part of the job, but just getting that verbatim, that that raw feedback from influencers, from random customers, and everything in between is awesome. So we've already announced the date for the next one. So I can't resist to plug in that we'll be back in Chicago in 2016. So at least you can start saving for this next one, or lobbying with your boss that next year you cannot miss Ignite if you didn't attend. Okay, so let's switch gear. Again, there was a much longer presentation, and actually two presentations that we delivered at Ignite, including the keynote, but pretty much what Benjamin has said at the beginning, but the world has changed. And hopefully I'm preaching to the choir. Typically, the way we talk about it is, you know, in my personal life, whether it's a fruity device, whether it's a sanctioned device, you know, I can do WhatsApp with family and friends. I can do Facebook Messenger. I can do a direct message to Benjamin on Twitter. I can do whatever. There's a gazillion of messaging app, and you know, I can get access to information, and I've got options to communicate now that I've got those devices. And because I can also get access to information to that device, typically we say, you know, that's causing some disruptions in with enterprise, where a business model that used to be traditional, where I would go in a certain way to our customers, now customers can find other options if they don't like the service, or find out more innovative way to do whatever they need, and think of, you know, Uber in the taxi business, or Airbnb when you want to stay somewhere, or any other business model. You know, you could argue even us at Microsoft, we're challenged with some of those new habits that consumers that we experience. Now, switching gears in the enterprise, it's historically, you could argue, you know, seeing some of the Q&A, you had an application that did content management, you had maybe an application that did a portal, you had an application that served email, and you get an application that maybe served PBX and enabled you to do good old-fashioned phone call, yada, and plenty of line of business application. So traditionally, this application has been siloed for historical reasons, for different vendors, different permissions, yada. And the challenge that's causing is, you know, you're losing some agility. Like if Benjamin is in love with his email, and Christophe is in love with his Skype, and Dan is in love with his Yammer, and I each using those different channels, how is Lyman going to figure out a nugget that, or connect the dot between Benjamin, Christophe, and Dan, because it looks like they're in 3 different teams, 3 different geos, but they're trying to solve the same problem. So how do you join forces? And in addition to that, so that's obviously a challenge today in the enterprise when you get siloed applications with different permissions, and very little discovery across those applications around all that intellectual property that the employees are producing. And in addition to that, which is kind of what we mean by the rise of dynamic teams, is the way people get together to work on a project, whether it's, you could argue this keynote we're doing today is a mini project. And, you know, we build a team there, we got contacted, we had a couple calls, we've exchanged some ideas on how we're going to do this, couple slides, and then, you know, the event is recorded, you get access to it, we move on. So it's got like a short lifespan, you know, maybe 2 weeks to prepare and deliver this end to end. And you get in that team, you know, we get folks across different organizations, across different Active Directory. It's not a Microsoft event. And Benjamin is definitely not part of Dan's organization. So the point is, like, teams form, crowdsource potentially to solve a problem, and then disband. Teams are spread across geographies. Teams are not physically together. Teams are not necessarily all in front of a PC, yada. And then so that challenge is what we mean by rise of dynamic teams is there's 3 things that we're going to be doing and investing in Microsoft to address that need that we're seeing emerging in the workplace. And those 3 things are modern collaborations, intelligent fabric, and personal insights. And basically, in the next couple slides, I'm going to really double click on what we mean by intelligent fabric. But to give you a high level, what we mean by modern collab is, again, Benjamin maybe travels quite a bit because he's a consultant, so he's at customers when he's not in the office doing an expense report, and probably at that moment he's probably on a mobile device. He wants to be able to co-offer. He wants to be able to do a quick video chat with Christoph if it's something urgent. So that's what we mean by modern and modern tools. Maybe the analogy I use is like back in the days, or let me skip that. Let me rephrase that. Today, you could argue there's many ways to write a book. I could write a book in Excel. I don't know if that's the best tool. I could be writing a book in PowerPoint. But now in the enterprise, I could also be using something like Sway. Or I could use OneNote, or I could use Word. I'm not saying which one is best, but there's just a lot of options that accrue to that notion of modern collaboration, that maybe for a guy like Benjamin, fairly young, and he likes animations and video, maybe Sway is a better tool to do storytelling on whatever he's trying to do with his customer. Personal insights, and I get back to Intelligent Fabric, but back to what I was saying earlier, there's a plethora of tools and options that people use to get work done, depending on what they prefer and their affinity. But the challenge today in the enterprise, as things are more agile, moving faster and faster, just by nature of being connected all the time and having this great thing called the World Wide Web, is what's really important in any enterprise, any organizations, whether it's a small organization or large organization, is are we reinventing the wheel over and over, or are we leveraging the collective knowledge of the organization? So instead of starting from scratch with a blank sheet of paper, maybe Dan did a presentation on SharePoint governance 4 years ago, and maybe in there's a couple nuggets that I can use that as a baseline to talk about governance in 2015. So again, you expand that to the entire organizations, and there's plenty of knowledge in any organization's side. So what we mean by personal insight, and instead of starting from scratch, help me start with what we already know about you, and more importantly, what your other colleagues are working on. So in here, you can think of some of the investments we're doing with Delve, with the Office Graph, and this is just the tip of the iceberg, that will be delivering to really help you get some intelligence out of all that data that we're collecting on how people work in your organization. The last piece is Intelligent Fabric. Like I said, people have different ways to work on how when they collectively working on a project. What's important is to connect all the dots. And whether you want to have a single membership that spans all the different applications, or like I say, you want to get some intelligence out of the activities everyone's doing when they're collaborating, which is again going to accrue to the last pillar I just talked about. So those two items that we're working on to deliver that intelligent fabric to enable team collaborations are both the Office Graph and Office 365 groups. And those two, to give you a little history, were announced over a year ago at SharePoint conference last year. And then they've kind of both started rolling out in first release last fall. And then Office 365 groups went worldwide in January, and Delve went worldwide in early April, so a couple of months later. So those are fairly new workloads that we've delivered. So let's double click on Office 365 groups. Again, the goal of Office 365 group is to tackle this notion of team collaboration and team communication. That's the pretty slides we put together for Ignite. But I want to stress it's very important. Like Office 365 group is great for team collaboration, meaning I got an objective, something I want to deliver. If I want to do one-on-one collaboration, there's no need for a group, for instance. I can just send an email to Benjamin, or I can just have a one-to-one Skype with Benjamin just to pick his brain on some question. So groups, what we mean by that, it's, think of it as a layer, as a fabric that spans all the workload that you have today in Office 365 and beyond. And the way we do that is we define a team, or when you define a team, it's a single definition in Azure Active Directory. And that definition spans the definition on the membership spans the entire suites. And that's what you're seeing in blue in this diagram are all the experiences that are leveraging that single definition today. You'll recognize some familiar workloads in there, such as Outlook. You get the ability to do conversations, you get files with OneDrive, you can do note-taking with OneNote, and so forth. And as you scroll to the right, with the vertical lines, with the dotted lines, are things we haven't shipped and things that we'll work on in the future. So think of those will be coming in the future, and I'll talk a little more about that when I talk about roadmap. So anyway,
Christophe, if I may,
go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt, because this slide is very important, at least for me when I saw it at first at Ignite, and I think I mentioned it to you a few times, because I find a lot of people, we tend to still look for products. We're still looking for, Outlook, SharePoint, the next gadget in SharePoint. And when as IT, we hear Office 365 groups, the first instinct is to think of it as another product, yet another new thing. But the slide really shows it well, and I think that's what's really important to grasp, is that it is not necessarily a new thing or product. It is, as you say, the fabric. It's that rectangle that brings those different verticals, link them together in that fabric. So wanted to give another praise for that slide. It really helped understand what Office 365 Groups is, I find.
Yeah, thanks, Benjamin, and thanks for stressing that. And you'll see me, depending on the questions, I'll depending on what you ask, I might be clarifying that, because typically a lot of people tend to mix groups, that layer, that fabric, with individual experiences. And another analogy is if I were showing you a slide of the Office graph. The Office graph, it's the same thing. It's not something you physically see with your eye and you can touch. It's that engine that collects actions you do in OneDrive, in email, and Calendar, and OneNote, and then it computes that. It does some machine learning, and then it spits out the results in Delve. And Delve is the end user experience that surfaces those signals from the Office graph. It's not the only one. For instance, the clutter functionality we've delivered in your Outlook inbox to help you triage email, same thing. It uses the graph and patterns of who you work with to help you really triage the noise from what really needs your attention. On the right-hand side that I've got, which is also important, is typical Microsoft. Yes, we'll deliver awesome experiences, but we'll also give you API endpoints so that whether you want to integrate with a line of business app that you get in-house, or you're an ISV, a third-party software developer, and you want to create an app that leverages some of that foundation and some of the infrastructure, it's something we've announced at Build a little before Ignite, and our API are in preview right now. So let me just do a couple more slides, and I will take Q&A. Looks like this slide didn't load properly, but this is just screenshots of what experiences you get with groups today. You can have Outlook conversations. You can you can have files associated with deliverables that the team is working on. You can do rich note-taking with OneNote, whether it's in the browser or different endpoints. You get calendaring, and then you can do a quick, you can do Skype call, HADA call with your group if you need to. So that's what we've got today. And again, it's available in production, so available to all your tenant, all your Office 365 tenant. Quick slides on what's coming next. So basically, there's two buckets. There's, first of all, end user investments to help, again, team get work done. And then there's the second bucket is around administration, or things we're doing for IT to make sure it abides to compliance and security standards and some of the key things that you need to manage and secure how a team collaborate in your enterprise. Now, just to be clear, before I dive into each of these, first of all, this is just up next for 2015, meaning there's going to be more beyond 2015. I didn't want to overpromise and just put things that isn't stuff from an engineering perspective. And then, so that's one thing. So this is going to be like a moving target, pretty much like our roadmap is for Office 365. And then the other thing I want to stress is we haven't listed everything on this roadmap. So definitely pay of what we're going to deliver in 2015. So hopefully there'll be surprises. And that's when the call to action is really stay on top of your game in terms of either subscribing to the Office roadmap or pinging your favorite MVP or your favorite Microsoft experts or yourself, following the Twitter handle of how we communicate news. So diving into giving you a little overview of what we've announced at Ignite. First of all, groups today is only, from a Outlook perspective, is only available in Outlook web app. So meaning in your favorite browser, you go to OWA and then you can send emails to groups. We're going to extend that to obviously take that to your favorite Win32 application, aka Outlook, and in this case Outlook 2016, and that'll be part of the Office 2016 wave that will ship in the fall. And yes, we're also a mobile-first company, and we'll take it. We'll have a mobile app across Windows Phone, Android, on iOS. Next thing that I'll show you a couple of screenshots are that we demoed at Ignite is, again, what a key problem that people are having, or challenge that people have in companies is, how do I find out that team? I get Christophe that I don't want to reinvent the wheel, but how do I find Benjamin's virtual team working on the Unity Connect keynote so that I can steal his deck or reuse some of the slides and don't start from scratch? So to help with discovery, groups are going to start surfacing in your Delve homepage. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Delve, but you should definitely check it out. And same thing on the mobile. We're going to start saying, oh, we know, Christophe, you're connected to, let's say you report to Benjamin from an org structure, and automatically based on org and actions, we can say, oh, if Benjamin's working on this, but a member of this group, maybe you should join, so you can stay on top of whatever Benjamin has set up a team to work on.
So and to again interrupt you, as always, interrupting you, but personally, we've been working, so I try sharing some experiences as you talk about these things. It's also interesting to see yet not only how people are working in maybe other groups and what they're working on, but we've had also people responsible for multiple teams just to keep track of their teams to see what they're working on and what they have on their priority. So we do have things, to stack cards and kind of or prioritize, but it's not always how people work. So it's interesting when, I'm looking at the marketing team and I'm looking at the content marketing team and looking at the design team and making sure just by looking at Delve activities for each of these groups to see what's been modified most, which comes at the top a little bit. And then maybe reorganize or restructure a bit the work and say, no, we really need to focus on this right now. So it adds a lot of value in that way as well.
Yeah, no, I mean, first of all, you can interrupt me anytime, Benjamin. That's why you're here. But no, I'm also bullish on Delve. Like I said, I've been at Microsoft 14 years. I grew up doing email, or I guess I started with the one-page memo back in the days. But you wouldn't believe how many discoveries by just, whenever I get a break, I open my Delve page, and just to make sure I stay on top of what's happening. You can imagine we're a big organization, but even folks down the hall, I don't have time to necessarily ask them every day or even every week, hey, what are you working on? And Delve is doing that for me. Yes, I can search. I say, show me every document Benjamin is doing. But again, the graph is doing all that legwork, and you wouldn't believe how many discoveries I found thanks to that. So I know personally, I'm definitely bullish on this. I've been using it for over a year, and it's one of those things where it's got the value is really growing exponentially as it's getting more signals and more people into it. It's kind of like that Metcalfe effect where more nodes are connected, the value grows exponentially. So the graph, awesome thing. You should definitely check out if you haven't. Skype Meet now is the ability to do a ad hoc meeting. So again, the goal, remember, of groups is to help team collaborate. And sometimes it's not all rosy. We might have an emergency. Let's do a quick stand-up. How are we going to solve this issue? And we'll give you a button in the UI so you can do a ad hoc chat or video or call, whatever you need. 1,000 pages, we're doing a bunch of investments to bring some of the SharePoint document library features to Office 365 groups to the file portion. Invite guest users is hopefully a no-brainer. We know collaboration is not limited to folks in my organizations and folks in my Active Directory. We always have that one-time expert, whether it's Dan, whether it's Benjamin, that's outside of the org, but still a key part of the team. So that's what we mean by guest users. Dynamic CRM is something we've announced at Ignite, which is CRM again, where maybe you have a sales team. You can map a sales opportunity to an Office 365 groups, and suddenly that sales team have access to a calendar, a OneNote, a file, and conversations, and more importantly, they get access to the rest of the org that's not necessarily licensed for CRM. Extensible, we've talked about that. We'll have API that will ship to help you manipulate group, whatever solutions, whatever bridge you want to do with whatever app. Quickly on the administration, what we're working on between now and the end of the year, a couple of key things that we didn't put at the start that a lot of larger organizations mainly have been asking, which is e-discovery, litigation hold, DLP, data loss preventions. We're also doing a number of investments to help with the circadian rhythm of groups. Remember, like groups could be created for one day, for a week. Maybe after a while, that group is it will add value at that moment in time. It's, there's nothing we should really keep. So potentially, can you do a soft delete, and can you start cleaning up some of these based on, hey, there hasn't been an activity for 60 days. Maybe we can start doing a soft delete before a hard delete and so forth. We're also going to be working with the Azure Active Directory team to give you more insights of, hey, Benjamin had created a group. Benjamin added Dan. Benjamin removed Christoph. Benjamin did this, blah, blah, blah. So again, from an IT perspective, you're always in the driver's seat, and you can always be on top of what's going on from a group creation. And then the other side of analytics we'll be working on is more for the community manager and users, which is, hey, how do I get insights on how my team is leveraging groups and how vibrant, how active it is, to again look at usage patterns that maybe you can replicate to improve collaborations as your organizations. And then there's a couple other things we're doing with Azure Active Directory, again, being such a key part of the group definition to help, with administration. Okay, enough talking. I think I went a little over 20 minutes. This is just screenshots of Dell. I'll skip that. Here's the one slides with all the content that you can find, the recordings, the decks, and more importantly, roadmap and Q&A. So with that, I'm going to stop the slides, and we're going to open it for Q&A, and maybe we can start with the on the thread there. Maybe Benjamin, you can help me with some of those questions.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And actually, before I even start on the thread, because you just mentioned it, you were talking about extensibility, third-party apps connected to groups. What exactly do you envision that, to consume a group or to add to the group, to link, say, I don't know, a Trello board, for example, if I can say that.
Yeah.
How do you envision
I like the way you think.
that connection, if there is anything like that?
I'll stick to the publicly available statements, and this is not under NDA. But at the high level, I'll tell you what the API can do. So the API can do anything around what we call CRUD operations around an object. So the creation of a group, reading a group, updating a group, and deleting a group. So I could just, you can do it with PowerShell, but with a simple REST API, I can issue a command to our data center and say, create the Unity Connect Keynote group. Voila. Then, so think of it like that layer in that diagram. I can create the group and its member. And then we get API for each of the experience. I can start a conversation, an Outlook conversations. I can upload a file. I can create a calendar event. And right now, those are the first three workloads that we've given you API with respect to groups. Over time, you can assume that all those blue experiences bar will have API endpoints. You can do some automations, whether it's read or write. So, use cases that customers have been asking us is, can I create I've already have a template for a group. It's like a standard, patent filing group. And to file a patent, there's probably a set of things we need to do, set of documents. And I could probably do a lot of legwork automating the set of meetings that team needs, the set of OneNote notes they need, and files. It looks like I got frozen again. But anyway. And then there's also things, so either that you create from scratch and you inject some data, or potentially you could want to inject specific items, like you say, maybe you want to integrate with a task management system and inject a conversation in the Outlook conversations.
Yeah.
So those are definitely supported scenarios. We'll be delivering, working with a well-known SharePoint developer MVP, Andrew, to deliver a developer lab to help people get started with that. And just
Awesome, thank you. I see a lot of opportunity for developers and even ISVs, products being made, because now you're no longer just working with just one product, right? You're not a SharePoint developer. You get access to the entire suite and quickly create a group that also connects to SharePoint and anything else really, which is really the fun thing. Now, Christophe is going to be back in just a few seconds so that his camera is going to work, and I'm just going to keep on talking while that's
come
happening.
Back, but just to finish on this before I try to log back in, but if not, you can hear me. The one point I want to illustrate how extensible groups are, the integration with Dynamics CRM. So in Microsoft, we say that's a partner team. They integrated using our API. So the CRM team in their use case, they actually have a single web page where they get all the pieces of the puzzle in one page. You can see the upcoming meetings, you can see the conversations, you can see the OneNote, you can see the files and the members. So it's just to show you how dedicated we are to internally to enable partner team to leverage groups, and obviously externally to help you guys leverage groups. Let me quickly log back in.
Excellent. I'll let you try to rejoin. Yeah, no, absolutely. And again, we have lots of information. We're going to add some links in the presenter notes for everyone. There's a couple of good resources on groups. But just to recap what Christophe was saying earlier, you have to see groups as not a tool. It's very, very important. It's not a product. Right? I see often the question, and we'll talk about that comparison. We try to compare it to Yammer. We try to compare it to team sites, but that's not what it is. It's not something tangible. It's more a magnet, right? It's the fabric, as they say, that brings the pieces, those smaller pieces that teams usually work in, right? Email conversation, a calendar, a Yammer group, a document library. So it pulls all of these things together so that you can work as a dynamic team, right? Really, that's what groups essentially is, and that's why it is really a good vision. And the way there he is, he's back. Thanks for joining in. So I was just giving a quick recap on groups while we were waiting for you. What I wanted to see, the first question was, I believe Josh was asking, he has Office 365, but it feels like there's still a lot of apps missing from different devices. Do you know what the story is on that? For Sway, for Video Portal, there's an app, but not on all devices, and Delve and Yammer. So how is that going to come all together for those dynamic teams in the future? I think you forgot to unmute yourself. Is that possible? Yeah.
That's definitely possible. Can you hear me? No, so yeah, that's a broad question, and I was gonna say, we've cloud first, mobile first, so it's definitely something dear to our heart, and we know that the usage pattern we need to give you awesome experience across the three main platform. I can't speak for every workload and the horse race, so not necessarily the horse race, but where we are. But I can tell you from a development perspective, sometimes, a lot of the time, the engineering want to make sure, let me nail an experience on one platform. And because, again, you could say, I got 3 developers, I'm going to get one on Android, one on iOS, and one on Windows Phone, and move in parallel and all ship one app. But you could argue, is that going to give me a third of the functionality, a third of the excitement, versus all 3 deliver a kick-ass, pardon my French, Windows Phone app, measure, look at engagement, look what's working, not working, and then replicate that to Android on iOS. Obviously, you're seeing us these days really innovate first on iOS and Android, and the simple reason we love a Windows Phone is just the market size. We can get so much more feedback and analytics just on the volume and because of the market size of those platforms, and that's why I know sometimes some of you are frustrated. Trust me, we love our Windows Phone, but sometimes we just get more feedback just because of the scale of those devices out there. I think over time, definitely like the way you think, like we should be across all endpoints, period. And not just the phone. When you see the Surface Hub announcement we made yesterday, we should be any screen size, whether it's a phone, whether it's a phablet, whether it's a tablet, whether it's a PC or a large-scale device like the Surface Hub. So definitely, I can tell you there's a lot of work. I think for Sway, for instance, since I've just started using it, since I created a group Sway, in that case, they went the route of creating an awesome mobile web experience.
Well, I think that answers the question.
Again, it's at the end of the day, you probably know this. There's pros and cons, and there's costs associated with staffing, making a big bet on one and not the other. So it's always a arbitrage that we're working on. But if there's anything specific, I can definitely follow up, Josh, on
Perfect.
where you are.
And
Yammer is all across all
yeah,
three
absolutely.
platforms.
Before I even go to because we got a question on comparing Yammer to SharePoint groups, and Office 365 groups. Sorry, but before I get to that, something jumped at me from Dan number 2.
That's kind of like the high level.
And he's very excited. It's the first time he gets a good overview and discussion on Office 365 groups. So awesome, Dan. Happy that you like it.
Hey, Josh, you asked about SharePoint.
His question sounds like Office 365 groups could be very useful for classroom instruction. Do you know of anyone using Office 365 for Classroom? And if I remember correctly, you had given me a pretty interesting statistic about groups and education. So I'll let you expand on that.
Yeah, so I'm trying to bite my tongue there because there's things I can't tell you. I'll give you you start at the high level. We're bullish on education. Microsoft a lot. This is not just... So pay attention. And with groups, the only thing I'm going to tell you is, we went worldwide in January, and we obviously been looking at usage quite a bit. Last night, I was spending quite a bit of time looking at scrubbing the numbers that we get for the month of May on monthly active users, daily active users, what specifically are the users doing. They're uploading files, are they starting conversation on their phone or via Outlook or directly in the browser? And yes, a significant portion of usage is coming from what we call education. And it's really split between universities but also primary school, from kindergarten to high school. I don't know if we are really people from kindergarten using groups, but if we do, kudos to the kids. And so we actually, we saw that pattern very quickly. Like there was more education folks in that segment that were using groups than, let's say, our large enterprise customers. So we actually did some research. We actually went on interviewed some of those school districts and some of the universities and literally went to talk to, in addition to IT, we went to talk to students. And the reason why people love it, aka the students, it's because it's self-service. And again, the typical thing is like, pretend that Benjamin is 15 years younger. No, he's gonna be way too young. But pretend you're 15, you're in high school, or you're a first-year university student, you're a freshman. With groups, they can just create that shared space to work on an assignment that's due on Friday. And they don't need to ask permissions. They can bring all their peers, and they work on the assignments for a couple of days. They hand it off. They get a straight A's, and voila. So that self-service, that self-service idea of group is why students love it so much. Now you could say, for those of you that in IT, you could say, well, we don't like self-service. We don't want it the wild, wild
and
west.
we are,
so that's
we're talking about schools and education right now, but that also speaks very much to businesses and enterprises. Assignment homeworks is our projects here, but it's also specifically the new people coming to the workplace. And I
Yeah,
can
it's
speak
it's
just
very
for here
interesting to
because
look
we
at
all
usage
often
data,
our developers are coming
and we're going to
sometimes
continue to
straight from the
do
university,
research. Something we do with all our
and they,
products,
the
but
whole
that's something actually I'll be doing
processes
in the
and
coming months,
no,
just
that's not how they
doing
used to.
qualitative
They're
and
used to
quantitative
going to
research
Facebook, creating an
on
event,
how are
getting
people
100 people coming,
using
and then posting it all on YouTube and talking on Twitter. And I'm not saying that that's what we want to bring to the office, of course, but it's that experience, what they're used to with technology, rather, to go and create something. If they've got to work on something, we have an intern who just came in and moving everything around, and we're not used to it, but that is where it's all going. So I find it's interesting to see technology, rather, to go and create something. If they've got to work on something, we have an intern who just came in and moving everything around, and we're not used to it, but that is where it's all going. So I find it's interesting to see such a high adoption rate in the education sector, and kind of like foreshadows where it's all coming and where it's all going inside of our enterprise. So I thought that was a great question. Thank you for that, Dan, number 2. And I'm going to go back up to a question, and it was a question that I had prepared simply because it's something that I hear often. And I hope we were a bit clear on that when we were talking about Office 365 groups earlier as being a fabric and not necessarily a product, one of those verticals that you're used to. Microsoft releasing Outlook, Microsoft releasing SharePoint, groups is something else. But let's go with the question. The question that I get, and where I'm joining a couple of questions together, there's been a lot of worry about Yammer and SharePoint team sites since groups was announced. A lot of people are confused, thinking there's too many things to worry about now. There's an extra thing, when really I don't necessarily see it as an extra thing, but rather bringing it together. But I think it's important to still talk about it. There's a lot of confusion out there with, Yammer. Is it going away because groups has ability to have conversations, which is email? So if you can just set that straight or talk about it a little bit, Christophe, pretty appreciate it.
Yeah, so to be clear, Yammer is not going away, and it's still a key hero immersive social experience that we have in the suite. So at the high level, think of Yammer as going to plug in, is going to become, well, actually that's what I done the diagram. Yammer was one of those vertical lines with the dotted line because it's not integrated, but Yammer will integrate with groups, and the beauty there is by elevating that definition of a group to an object in Azure Active Directory that spans the entire suite, is suddenly in Yammer you'll get access to a set of file repository via OneDrive for Business. You'll get access to calendaring, which you don't have in Yammer today. You'll get access to OneNote for rich note-taking, and so forth. So Yammer will plug into that single membership and permission that is powered by Office 365 groups, and so that's kind of like the high level. We've shared. I just shared in the IM a blog post that puts that in words on how we're thinking about it, and we've also shared a timeline. It's going to take about a year for us to get there. Hopefully, we'll beat expectations, but I really want to set expectation that this is not coming in the coming month. And that's why Yammer wasn't on the up next in 2015 for groups. But hopefully, maybe the next time I'm at Ignite, I will show you the integration of Yammer and Office 365 groups. So just to close on that, think of in the future, when you'll create a group out of Yammer, you'll think you're creating a Yammer group, but what you're effectively doing, you're creating an Office 365 group. So again, we're going to elevate that membership and permission to that top layer. So that's what we're going to do with Yammer. So Yammer is still around, and if you're using Yammer and it fulfills your needs, still continue to use it, and it'll get better in the future. Another question to be one step ahead of you, Benjamin, is a similar question I get with SharePoint. Hey, should I create a SharePoint team site? And SharePoint team site will be the same thing, where a SharePoint team site in the future, one of the specs we get on the backlog is, in the future, maybe you'll have the option when you create a team site, instead of having permissioning at the site collections or at the team site level, instead you'll elevate membership and permission at that group's layer. So it's not just a siloed in SharePoint, but suddenly you get access to all that stuff. So that's something on the backlog that we're also looking at, where, pardon me, pretty much like Yammer, you can continue with that immersive experience at a SharePoint team site. Whatever you did in that team site,
maybe
you
see what this is?
Code, custom
These
web
are
part,
goosebumps.
custom widget, blah,
That
blah,
is
blah.
an amazing,
And then you
amazing
can stay
feature.
there.
Very exciting.
But once you're
to
ready
stay
to
in the
maybe
team
leverage
site and
other
just
workflows,
provision
other
other
experiences, you'll
things
be able to
and
do
bring it
so
together in
because
that
the membership
all
of
right.
that team
You
is
can tell I'm a
spanning the
geek. I'm
entire,
excited about these things as well.
all those experiences
But
that are leveraging Office
it's
365.
definitely exciting. So it's important to not see either the cloud, the cloud or groups as some kind of new enemy, or it really is about bringing the different silos that we have created together. If you use Yammer right now and you create a Yammer group, as you said, it'll just be associated to an Office 365 group. And maybe later on, that Yammer group needs a calendar. And I'm sorry, I don't want the SharePoint calendar. I want the real calendar. So we're going to go and provision that from the group. That's what we mean by Fabric. And that's why I absolutely love this concept. It's you have a SharePoint team site, and team sites aren't necessarily going away. The files concept of the groups for Office 365 is about that quick file sharing. And frankly, we've seen, I mean, we can say what we like. We love metadata and all of that stuff, but the reality is many customers out there have just been dumping files in a document library, and there's no necessary content types or metadata. That's what they have. And so that is perfect for that team site that was not meant to be a team site in the first place. But then for all of those other ones that have those heavy team sites with those document libraries, workflows, and all of that stuff, that then need a calendar or need a Yammer group conversation to have that. That is brilliant. I absolutely love that. So very important to see it that way. That's why I had the question prepared, because I'm just like everyone else. It was my first instinct. I went to see Christophe at Ignite, actually. If you remember Christophe. And I said, so I'm about to write a blog post saying Yammer is dead, so I'm just letting you know. And he's like, what are you talking about? It has nothing to do with that. And from that point on, and that's why I was happy to go to Ignite, I was able to see that. So following up on that question, Christophe, what would you recommend, right? People are still new to this concept. How would you recommend they start figuring out what they should use when? Now they're looking at everything. They've got SharePoint on-premises. We've seen some hybrid stories coming along as well for the Office Graph, even with 2013 with a Next Service Pack. And we've seen the cloud. We've seen Office 365 groups. So they're looking at all of this. And they've got a scenario, a business problem that they want to solve. How do you recommend they go about to see what they should, how do they start with all of that? What should they use first? Or, you know what I mean.
Yeah. So I think that I'm doing some research on this topic, because the way we're seeing it, and hopefully I'm not going to offend anyone, is it really an end user problem to figure out what tool to use? Let me give you the example. Like, did Benjamin need teaching whether he needs to use WhatsApp to reach Christophe, Twitter, direct message, a little old-fashioned email, a little Skype, a little WhatsApp, a little Facebook Messenger? Like, does Benjamin really need someone to say, Benjamin, to reach Christophe on his mobile phone, you need to use Facebook Messenger? And to push it further, I hear it from IT, where they say, give us what tool when to use. But from an end user, is it really a challenge? Because we're so used to have a bunch of options. We pick something if it works, and then we'll go with it. Obviously, assuming it's blessed by our enterprise as a corporate solution that abides by our standards. But after that, do we need to be taught, when should I use a Skype? You know, right now we're doing a conference call with a competitor's product. That's okay. If that's the format to do this event, that's fine. You know, I'm here to collaborate and communicate. It doesn't matter. So with that said, you know, I definitely hear it from IT, like, hey, Christophe or Microsoft, you got all those things in the suite and more. When should I use a video portal? Or back to the analogy, when should I use Excel to write a book versus Word versus OneNote versus Sway versus whatever? And what I think is a better question is, back to what you alluded to, Benjamin, is it's more of it's not so much which tool when, it's like, what are you trying to achieve? What is the business case, or what is the scenario? Hey, we need to do an event with a set of folks from across the globe that are not part of our Active Directory. Maybe there's not too many options. Maybe in this case, it's Skype for Business, and we'll do a webcast. Maybe it's asynchronous communications. I need to send something to all the attendees after the fact. Obviously, we're not live. Should we send an email? We could. Should we create a team site and make it shared externally and we can grab the documents? We could. Should we put the file on OneDrive and you just download it? Should we create a Yammer group? You could, and so forth. So there's definitely, depending on the use case, different options. I definitely do want to do a plugging. I think the sessions was yesterday, and we also have a lengthy session we delivered at Ignite, but from Richard and Canwell, two Canadian SharePoint MVPs that talk about a little bit of which tool when, and you'll see that it's not a straight answer. And even for one team, yeah, in marketing to do, let's say, a product launch, one team will use a set of tools to launch a product, and another team might use another set of products. Is it good or bad? As long as, again, it's vetted by IT and it's secured, then that's okay, right? As long as they launched the product on time and it's successful, it doesn't matter what they use, really, at the end of the day. So with that said, it's definitely, again, like something where I'm doing research and
that is exactly what was going to be my point. As you're discussing all of this, I was remembering, and it's a story I tell often to people I meet. We were at a meeting with a CIO that we were talking about Office 365, and I think at the time we were looking at OneDrive for Business because they wanted, sync offline and stuff like that. But we had another meeting the week after or something, and the topic completely changed because he got the information that people have been using other things. So even though IT historically has said you use this for this, people who definitely weren't, right? Some people in a military context organization couldn't send me a video, so they used a web service, right? Either Dropbox or WeTransfer.com, and that organization I was talking about, people were on YouTube private channels, putting their video to do the training there because it would work on devices and they could do playlists, and they didn't have that experience themselves. And the same, going back to what you said, the different teams work differently, and we see this all the time. They use different tools, whatever works. Even when higher up or IT has said we're going to use whatever the product is to do conversation, they'll go with what works for them, and that's what can happen. And I think the way I see groups right now, at least the way you introduced it and what's coming along, especially what you just told us about team site being allowing to provision with a group context of some sort, is the ability to start with something. And then later on, if we need that team site, then we go get it. Whatever the team needs dynamically, dynamic teams goes and gets it. So that was very interesting.
Yeah. So I'm just going to pick up on something that Ryan shared. He's saying not anti-groups, just sometimes fail to see the greater Microsoft goal for the different products where there's an overlap in functionality. And again, I'm not. I agree with you. Like in some of those experiences, there is some overlap in shape or form. And again, at this day and age, we think like overlap is okay. We're assuming once you bought the suite, your license for 365, you get access to all those things. Again, it's similar to what I was saying. Like in our consumer life, there's definitely some overlap with WhatsApp, Facebook Messenger, Viber, and whatever. I'm sure you can name half a dozen. Very lot of overlap, or you can add SMS to that. And for some reason, like, it's okay to have overlap, and we still have different apps for whatever reasons. If at the end of the day those apps help me get work done, yes, I can be using a Skype to do an IM with Benjamin, but let's say it's OOF, he's out of the office, that thread is going to get copied in email, and we'll get reminded that I pinged him, and I could have done an email in the first place because I knew he was on vacation, or I could have done a Yammer message. Those are all valid answers. At the end of the day, if I can get a hold of, if Benjamin can answer the question I've asked him, then that's okay. You know, I can just move on. I can tell you the way people ask, okay, how do you work at Microsoft? I can tell you our team, you know, we've got all our files in SharePoint because being in marketing, we produce a lot of pretty decks, and we need co-authoring and we need versionings. So all the files, there's no exceptions, are in our SharePoint team site. Now, we actually don't use SharePoint besides a document repository with all the glory and love of Office Online. All our conversations are I'll say about 80% are in Yammer, and then we still have one-on-one emails.
Yeah, and it's a very good question. I understand that
that's how we work.
Is even though there are different
tools
that provide
like
these different or overlapping experiences,
that just works for us
sometimes
on our use case.
It's a simple matter of a user experience and how a team works. And it could be just a little bit different enough that they prefer having Yammer over doing chat and Skype for Business or doing emails. So by providing these different experiences or making them available, but still under that Microsoft Office umbrella, it allows IT or whomever to still manage that overall everything instead of having them break off and go somewhere else. So we'll still have that management and administration, as Christophe said earlier on the roadmap, that is all getting added. So you will still be able to control depending on wherever that is. So that, I mean, that's the way I see it. I don't want to linger on it too much either. Don't know if I saw another question. Did you see one? Otherwise, I have one.
No, just to close on that, because I'm just reading the thread between Sherman and others. Again, it's something we're investigating. You know, that's why we want to do some quantitative research. You know, we're against user groups and stuff like that. So we really get to the bottom of this, and you know, maybe I'll be conducting research with end users, and maybe I'll be conducting research with IT administrators to really get to the bottom of the issue. And once we've clearly done some research and identified, then finding solutions, you know, back to your ask earlier, maybe some audiences need to be handholded of, hey, Christophe, you should use Skype for immediate interactions, or when you're working from home. And Christophe,
perfect. So I mean, we'll move along until we find another. And please don't hesitate to ask us questions. That's what we're here for. And the next thing, logically, it's what role does Delve? I mean, we talked a little bit about Delve. How do you see that fit in a typical day at the office? We've talked about it, so no need to necessarily stay too much on it either. But how do you see that fit in there?
So again, Delve is, as we mentioned, like, you know, initially Delve, when we went with first release and was really getting signals mainly from files like OneDrive and SharePoint. And we know in an organization, we know you're not in front of your PowerPoint. I mean, we'd love if everyone was just looking at Office all day long, but we know that's not the case. You got to run into a meeting. You got to take some notes. You're on a call. You're sending an email. You're whatever. You're on Yammer. So initially, Delve kind of started really at the help me get insights of what other people are doing. You know, how do I discover that Benjamin is the go-to person to answer a question in French in Canada about SharePoint? And where we've evolved Delve is we've made two other key announcements that you should really pay attention to in the future with Delve. So Delve really started at the me space, like me, Christophe, me being selfish, help me stay on top of my game. The first thing we've announced at Ignite is Delve is going to grow into helping teams, helping you discover teams. And then once you discover teams, so today in the Delve board, for those of you who've used it, you can see you get a set of documents, you know, that's sorted just for you based on the strength and the affinity based on what you do. In the future, one of those cards could be a group. It could be a team. It's like, it's not just, we won't just recommend content. We'll recommend, hey, you should join the Quebec SharePoint group. So you go to that group, and what Delve is going to do, besides surfacing that maybe based on the org and whatever I do, it's connecting the dot that I should join this team. Once you're in there, Delve is going to give you like a single pane of glass of what's happening across all those modalities. So again, we agree that you get all those experiences. Those were the blue line that I had on this diagram. But it's important for you when Delve is saying, "Oh, you should join this group." You probably the first reaction is like, "Well, let me check it out. What is it about? Oh, look, there's this good-looking Benjamin guy. Okay, great. Let me look at the members. Let me look about what they've done. What are they meeting? When's the next stand-up? Oh, when's the free beer night? Maybe that's why I should join. Free beers. Or what deliverable have they produced? Yada, yada, yada." So you see, you get like a collection of kind of widgets that show you a glimpse of what the team is all about. And then the next thing that Delve is going to give you, which is also a very common scenario, is let's pretend you've been out of the office and you get back on Monday. How do you get caught up with all your team members on what's been going on? You can do it the traditional way and going to your inbox with 1,000 messages you get, going to your Yammer, and then typically with documents, that way it gets very tricky. Like, how do you get caught up on if Benjamin updated a budget or a deliverable? And that's where Delve comes in. I'll give you, like, again, a single pane of glass on activities that happen in the group. So that's the second thing Delve is going to do. It's going to go graduate from me helping connect with people to me connecting with teams. And then the third thing that I wasn't really planning to talk about today, which I think is the most exciting, so it's great to connect people, to connect teams, where you get the network effect, is Delve is going to start giving you organizational insights. As Julia mentioned at Ignite, like a little bit of a org fitness, which is, hey, how are teams working? Are some of the teams mainly exchanging email with one another? Are they just instead meeting? Or are they just not connected? And based on that, maybe there's things we can learn. How come those two teams are meeting on a weekly basis, but they're not bringing
That is
this
very
other
exciting.
team? So
Actually,
again, giving you insight. So
that.
at the end of the day,
If you haven't seen the
you get more
keynote,
value,
because that was
you
another
get more agile,
goosebumps
and you stay
moment.
more competitive. So
At the keynote,
those
we're
are
talking
the
about, we're
three
showing
things that we
Delve,
announced at Ignite.
and it was
Again, the ability
leveraging groups,
to surface group as
the
a first-party
fabric
citizen in
groups,
Delve,
and Office
and then to
Graph,
give you
and it was showing
organizational
how
insights
different
within Delve.
groups that weren't talking to each other, because since
I'll
the Office Graph connects calendars, it connects conversations, it connects everything really. They showed a very nice dynamic diagram, very Power BI-ish if you've looked at that, in Delve Insights, that really shows you that the, say, marketing team never really talks to the development team of the project's lifecycle, whatever the case. That was really, really, really cool. It's bad. It's bad.
But so there's a very good question from Josh. Do you have recommendations for how to deal with users that are scared about their data being used to help make Delve a better experience for them? And it's funny because I had the same issue, when I was the product manager for Yammer. I didn't know anything about Yammer. I've got to admit, it was shortly after the acquisition, and what's the point? And then I drill into and I look at really the real value where people were craving about it. It's because things were public by default. And there's a lot of movement out there. Leave aside Microsoft, there's a movement of working out loud. But what I can't remember who told me very early on in the journey, where the haha moment was, hey, Christophe, if you're working on something and you're not sharing it, why are you working on it? The point is, and I'm talking within my organization, like, it doesn't matter if I'm working on specs or something hush-hush, I should share it with my organization. And because the collective knowledge, not only Ben in engineering might be working on a similar problem, or might have a very valid feedback, or might be interested, or might have a dependency on what I'm working on, and vice versa. So it's that a notion that I'm paid by one employer, I should just put all the IP, all the intellectual property back into that collective knowledge without being selfish. I'm in addition to being employed by Microsoft, I'm also a shareholder, but I want the company to do well. So why is that? To me, it's when it was about 2 years ago when I switched from having everything in my OneDrive private to dumping everything in SharePoint public. And yes, sometimes I get some odd requests, and some people want to use something that's still preliminary. The ink is not dry. It's not a commitment. And they want to talk to our customers. Like, no, 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 no. We haven't committed on that. We're exploring things. But overall, I get more value just because I'm only one guy. I can only do so many hours per day before I go work at or enjoy my family. But I want to bring all that IP to Microsoft so that if Christophe leaves, if Christophe retires, whatever, Microsoft has everything that was in my head or everything that I produced that's digitally recorded, and everyone has access to it. So it's a tough discussion, Josh. It's it goes beyond groups, but it's sometimes it's a generational gap as well. Like our kids, you would believe how many hours I've got to spend with my kids and they're pretty young, on why you should not put a picture with your name and address on Instagram. That's a problem we didn't have to deal with when we were growing up because we didn't have smartphone. Benjamin had one because he's young, but an old guy like me had nothing. I had pigeons and telegraphs. But so there's definitely, like I said, working out loud and working the open within an organization is definitely great. You got to make sure that people don't share on the outside, yada, yada, yada. But it's a challenging discussion. I think we haven't seen the end of it. I see that as kind of like a turning point. And because historically, as you all know, and blame it on us, you had those siloed apps like SharePoint, email, or IBM, and you can name it, or SAP, whatever. So it's I'll see if I can find a better
some really
answer
good
or
points
article
there. And
you can
like
bing
the
it.
vision.
That working out loud movement.
Yeah, no,
is pretty
definitely
strong.
is
It has
a
nothing to
change
do with
management thing. And
specific
while you're
vendor,
on
but
that
that's the
road
same
to that
theme. Like,
ultimate goal,
why is it
you
important within
understand
your
that Delve
organization to
only
work out
shows
loud?
its search. So
And
it only shows
how
what
does it
you have
accrue to the
access to
collective
at the end of the
value and
day.
driving
And
the
there's
quality of
also,
your
if you're working with SharePoint, there's a column that you can add as
definitely a
the
change
site administrator that allows, regardless of permissions, to hide certain content from the Office graph or Delve. I'm not exactly. It's pretty much the same thing. So we don't have a lot of time left, I think. So if you have questions, please ask them right away. I have 2 questions that I'm gonna ask Christophe here until I see some other questions pop up. One of the first question, and I think we've answered it pretty much when you talked about team sites being there as well and as part of that group's experience and perhaps in the future. I know you're looking at that for now. But essentially, a lot of people have been using metadata. And metadata isn't bad. It just doesn't work in all context all the time. Is there a vision where documents in the files experience, or it's hard to say, but in the group's total fabric, there's that section called files. Well, we go to OneDrive for Business, what that is really showing us, that SharePoint site there. And we can't add metadata right now. Now, I kind of agree with that because that's the way I see groups, is that just collaborating on documents. But some people are asking, is there a vision where you will be adding metadata directly to the documents instead of presenting it through boards, for example, as a presentation layer of documents that come from different groups? And then I'll ask the next question, since we only have 10 minutes left. Can you maybe leave us with a little bit of the future of groups? You've talked to us today about team sites tying in, and is there something else that's going to be plugging in? Maybe Power BI, maybe something else I'm not thinking of that attaches itself to groups that you can share or that you've shared at Ignite, and that among all the content I may have missed.
Great. So let's start with the metadata. It's, to be transparent, it's not something that we have on our backlog at this stage. So, if you feel strongly, then definitely pass the feedback. And we got a user voice page for groups where you can vote things up and down. But to expand it, one thing I can tell you is metadata goes way beyond SharePoint. And especially with things like groups, where you get a set of experience, the right question you should be asking me is, are you going to introduce maybe tagging or metadata across all the experiences? Why siloed it to SharePoint? Yes, there might be a very valuable document that you want to flag or tag with a specific item, but there might have been a conversation with the answer to a question or how we came about a decision on that slide that you want to tag as well, so that at the end of the day, you get access to 2, not just the document, but the decisions that Benjamin and Christophe reach over bouncing email back and forth, and so forth. So yeah, tagging is definitely something we're looking at a much broader level than just metadata, since we think it's not just a challenge in documents. There's a challenge today, you could argue, on finding, how do I find a specific conversation with a specific outcome? Besides, yeah, I can do search, but isn't there a more efficient way to do it this day and age? And again, taking some of those things that we experience in our personal life, where it's hashtag galore across Instagram and Facebook and Twitter and blah, blah, blah. And maybe there's something there that could help productivity, so I can slice across a tag and see everything. I do agree that at the end of the day, when you look at the research, there's not a lot of people that actually tag things. And a lot of the time when they tag it, it's incorrect. Or everyone's got their own way of spelling it, so you end up with 50 tags, which means 50 ways of spelling SharePoint. So good luck making sense out of that. And you might say, well, Christophe, we can do a taxonomy, but the problem is, as soon as you introduce like a hierarchy of things, then suddenly the bar to using it's much higher, and Christophe's going to give up. Like, I don't have time to scroll to find out that node on your taxonomy to find the official SharePoint Saturday tag.
A little bit extra. Up, right? It's just refreshing to hear, because we're still asking the questions.
And so I feel like I'm
stuck in the IT thinking and want to protect my metadata and stuff, but it's refreshing to hear that you're looking at innovating and changing the way it's done, not just bringing what already exists, just to answer the question, or just to bring
what's
it. So
coming.
It's nice to see groups taking that kind of a lead in changing the way it's happening a bit, but still for the better, of course.
I think just to close on metadata, and again, maybe I'm going to offend some people, it doesn't matter how well I tag a document. What matters this day and age is not so much how it was tagged, is how relevant it is to the problem I'm trying to solve. Like, as an end user, do I care that a document has 16 tags? What I care about is, like, give me that Benjamin or that Dan guy who produced specs a year ago. That's the experts I want to go to, so I write my own spec. I don't look at tags. I just want to find out that Benjamin guy. Pros. And get on a call and say, I'm working on those specs.
Looks like you're a video pros, but that's fine. We've just got 5
your
minutes.
specs a year ago.
Awesome. Well, thanks again very much for this discussion. I think it helped a lot. I've seen some really good questions, and it's exciting to see where all of this is going and try to figure out how teams and people what's the vision of Microsoft, but also how people could work together and leverage what they already have, but by bringing it together. And yes, absolutely agree. Power BI is amazing. For those of you that haven't looked at it yet, there's a free version of Power BI. It's a freemium model. I think today or yesterday, even for those of you that are using MailChimp for a newsletter, they announced that they are working with Power BI as well to export those dashboards. And I'm expecting to see a lot more of that coming along. So it's very exciting to see that refreshing new things coming out, and as not just new, right? Because it's something to see 2007 go to 2010, and Office bringing in a toolbar, but it's something else to have a vision of how people are going to work and trying to implement and change the way people actually work on a day-to-day basis. So again, thank you very, very much, Christophe. I know you're very busy, and I'll let you get back to working on those extra features, especially that team site thing I'm very excited about. And I'll let you close off this amazing keynote. Thanks again. Appreciate it. Thank you.